Good evening and welcome to Farnborough. This is the first of 3 programmes we'll be broadcasting from the world's premier air show of 1992. We'll be seeing whether there's a future for air shows like this and indeed for Britain's aviation industry. Joining me on the team will be Helen Sharman, Britain's only astronaut, as well as former Army Air Corps pilot and of course sports presenter Julian Tutt. We'll be taking you into the cockpits of some of the world's most exciting aircraft, like the Eurocopter Tiger and the Airbus A340, and pushing them to their limits. But the stars of the show this year are the Russians. They've arrived here with a number of prototypes and experimental models which only a few months ago were strictly under wraps, and they're here to sell. The Yak-141, for example, initially grounded by the organisers for burning up the runway, literally, flew for the first time today. It's the Russian equivalent of the Harrier jump jet, and the flying characteristics of this prototype are still something of a closed book. Then there's a totally new concept in attack helicopters, the Ka-50 Werewolf, or Hokum in NATOese. It has contra-rotating main rotor blades and no traditional tail rotor. Grounded too. It arrived by container, but its pilot didn't. It's destined for the Russian army, if the pilot ever shows up, that is. Another Russian first at Farnborough is the Tupolev Tu-204-200, powered by Rolls-Royce RB211 engines. This should be the first Russian airliner certified to Western airworthiness standards. The other major civil attraction at the show is the remarkable Airbus A340, Europe's first long-range, 4-jet engine civil airliner since the de Havilland Comet. Airbus is a European success story, but there are problems in collaborating with other companies and countries, as well as advantages. Germany's decision to pull out of the production phase of the European Fighter Aircraft, or EFA, has left a big hole in the consortium. EFA is not at the show, though the first prototype model has been finished and the first flight is expected in October. But its absence overshadows the events here. On this one programme alone, about 97,000 jobs throughout Europe depend. The highlight of this show has been the number of new aircraft on display, which has belied the feelings of doom and gloom pervading the business chalets. A few years ago, at a show like this, Concorde was born from a casual conversation between the heads of British Aircraft Corporation and France's Sud Aviation. And there are few more potent reminders of the technical virtuosity and business potential of today's aircraft than Europe's largest and latest long-range airliner, the Airbus A340. Here at Farnborough, the plane which can fly further than any other civil airliner in the world. It's Europe's first real assault on the intercontinental wide-body market, so far dominated by the Americans. Airbus has more than 500 potential orders from airlines worldwide for this aircraft and its twin-engine sister, the A330. The aircraft will be able to fly up to 17 hours non-stop, or London to Sydney, but the pain of long-distance travel should be eased for passengers by the availability on every seat of individual video monitors. fly-by-wire, which means the aircraft's control systems are run by computers, allows the pilot to maneuver the huge 4-engine, 390-seat airliner with exceptional control. Look at this, very low speed and the nose way up. It's given Airbus a vital edge over its more conservative competitors, whose aircraft derived from 1960s designs. The philosophy behind the cockpit technology is explained by test pilot Nick Warner.
The design objective was to make this flight deck as close as possible to a 320 flight deck. The only changes on the flight deck are changes necessary to accommodate the 4 engines. So obviously we've got 4 throttles. In the roof panel you'll see the systems have been developed to meet the demands of a 4-engined aeroplane. Other than things like that, the philosophy, the layout is exactly the same as the 320. The side stick's the same, the panels are the same, the flight control unit is the same. And we hope that a 320 pilot can step out of a 320, step into a 340 and feel at home and fly it accurately in a very, very short time. The whole principle of the airplane is that the pilot is not allowed to override the computer. And with all systems normal, all systems working, around the normal flight envelope, he has a safety net which prevents him taking the airplane out into potentially dangerous areas of the flight envelope. We're not saying that flying as a skill has gone out of the window. The pilot still needs to have some flying skills. We in Airbus, we can honestly say that we have pioneered this fly-by-wire in the civil world. And our feeling is that in 10 or 15 years from now, the rest of the world will be following this path.
It's not just airliners which are benefiting from the advances in flight control systems. The latest generation of fighter aircraft owe their incredible agility to fly-by-wire technology. A classic example, Sweden's new combat aircraft, the Gripen. This is the first time we've seen it at Farnborough. The aircraft is making a considerable impact at the show with the agility of its display routine, flown here by Lars Raderström. Saab Aircraft, the prime contractor, describes Gripen as an all-weather, all-altitude fighter, attack and reconnaissance aircraft, and they're hoping it might appeal to the German Air Force as an alternative to IFA. It's a versatile fighter with a remarkable operating performance. The Swedish Air Force has stipulated that the aircraft must be capable of operating from roads no more than 900 yards long. That's why there are design features like the small winglets or canards in front of the main delta wings, and why the fly-by-wire system is so important. Well, that's okay as long as the war's in Sweden. They couldn't do it in the UK. There are too many roadworks.
The Swedes may be here in strength, but what was to be the star of the show, the European fighter aircraft, the IFA, is absent. This is just a mock-up. The first prototype is not scheduled to fly until later this year. Even so, there's no lack of interest in it. Since Germany's decision to pull out of the production phase of the contract, British Aerospace has been gathering its 2 other European partners around it to dispel doubts about the programme's survival, Alenia of Italy and CASA of Spain. But what will IFA be like? To give us a combat pilot's eye view, we asked Flight Lieutenant Rory Underwood, the former England rugby international, to take IFA through its paces. That's in programme 2, with the simulator on Sunday afternoon. And in programme 3 next Thursday, we'll return to IFA and look at the whole question of the British aerospace industry's future and talk exclusively to British Aerospace Chief Executive Dick Evans. Welcome now to another of our presenters, Helen Sharman, Britain's first astronaut and part of the Anglo-Soviet space mission in May of last year to the Mir space station. Helen, let me ask you the question that everybody asks you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Was it exciting?
Well, yes, of course it was exciting, but in ways different to those that I had initially expected. I mean, the launch itself, there was so much to do, concentrating on what was going on, making sure that I was doing my job properly, that bit wasn't the most exciting part. I think the best bit really was the weightlessness.
I can imagine. Well, what was it about the weightlessness?
Just being able to float, I mean, to sit down on absolutely nothing at all. And that was what was good for all my experiments, of course. That's what made them work.
Were you scared?
I wasn't frightened. I think you're only really scared of the unknown. The training was so good, there was no unknown left for us.
Not even during takeoff?
During takeoff,
off?
There's just so much to do during takeoff. There's no time to be scared.
Now, I know you're not a pilot, but you have been here to Farnborough before.
I came to Farnborough for the first time 3 years ago. As part of the initial selection process, we did some of our medical tests here, but I actually came back again a few days ago, have another go on the centrifuge here.
On the centrifuge, because you had to do that, of course, for your initial training, before you could go up in the rocket.
That's right.
And what about the centrifuge this time? You came back and you did it for us.
Well, I did the centrifuge again, really to show some of the differences between the type of G-forces that I was expecting, that I endured on my space flight, and the differences between some of the things that the pilots do.
OK, well, let's have a look at you doing it now. Thank you.
OK, then, Helen, are you sitting comfortably?
I'm fine.
Then we'll begin at, this will be a bog standard 3G run, 1G per second onset rate, and then 15 seconds at peak G and down again.
OK.
And then we'll just go up in 1G increments to find out the maximum G at which you're happy to do your stuff.
OK, fine.
So, ready here to 3G, whenever you are, John.
So I'm back with my old friend, the centrifuge. The last time I was here was during the astronaut selection, where we used the centrifuge to see how our bodies would cope under conditions of, well, the accelerations we might experience under launch and possible landing, re-entry through the atmosphere. But this centrifuge is also used for other purposes. For instance, to check out how pilots and their equipment cope when they're pulling different types of G-loads, where the G might not be so steady. Okay, let's take it to the next stage. Fast jet pilots, for instance, those that might be working in the F-16 or in EFA, they may well be pulling higher G-loads for shorter time. Astronauts will pull moderate G-loads for much longer periods of time. Okay, let's go for it. This is now 7G. If I were in EFA, there could well be another 2G to go. Today at Farnborough, a real surprise. The first public flight of Russia's cumbersome yet supersonic version of the Harrier, the Yak 141. It hovers using the unique swivelling tailpipe of its main engine. But the Yak was banned from taking off vertically by the organisers after burning holes in the runway here last weekend. It's like nothing else in the air. This is Russia's answer to the Boeing 757, the Tupolev Tu-204. As well as looking remarkably similar to the 757, what makes this aircraft stand out from other ex-Soviet models are the engines. Rolls-Royce RB211s, the same that power the 757. Rolls-Royce engineers have been in Russia since May, working with the Tupolev Design Bureau on the project.
10, 9, 8, stop, 7, 6, 5, 4...
And the aircraft comes to the show as part of an Anglo-Russian enterprise, Bravia. Another major difference is that the airliner is planned to be certified to Western airworthiness standards, which should mean it will be able to compete on equal terms with Airbus, Boeing and McDonnell Douglas aircraft of similar configurations. The Tupolev 204 has a maximum range of 7,500 kilometres, with a seating capacity of about 190 when fitted to Western standards. With this aircraft, Russia is now a major contender in the civil aviation market.
This should have been one of the stars of the show. It's the most revolutionary helicopter ever to have come out of the Russian aircraft industry. It's the Ka-50, known as Hokum in NATO, because nobody over here actually believed that it existed. But of course the Kremlin knew better, and it's just gone into production for the Russian army. It's a single-seat attack helicopter with devastating firepower, including a 30mm cannon, up to 16 anti-tank missiles or 80 rockets. Now, I said that it should have been the star of the show, but for reasons that seem to come straight out of a James Bond movie, it's not actually flying here. According to Russian officials, the British government has delayed issuing visas to the pilot and flight test engineers, they say because the West is frightened of its performance. Perhaps it could yet be a serious challenger for the new British Army attack helicopter contract.
Well, Hokum may not have taken to the air, but its thoroughbred fellow countrymen have. Here's a glimpse of some spectacular Russian flying. Another little Russian trainer that's been impressing the Farnborough crowds is the stylishly painted Mil Mi-34 helicopter. It's incredibly agile and can loop and roll without problem. Now, talking about agile, watch this for an unusual manoeuvre. With handling like that, it could well have a market in the West. But Mil's first priority is to win an order of over 1,000 for the Russian Air Force.
And then, following on the heels of Konkordsky, VC-10sky and Tridentsky, comes Notarsky, as Mil are planning to build a version without the traditional tail rotor.
McDonnell Douglas, of course, already has the Notar or no-tail rotor in commercial production. It means a whole new attitude to flying, as demonstrated by the first to arrive in this country. They've got rid of the tail rotor by using a blown air system, which turns the tail boom into an aerofoil, providing horizontal lift that stops the machine spinning uncontrollably. There's also a rotating thruster, all of which helps to reduce the pilot's workload. And working in confined spaces becomes much safer. You might upset the boss if you chip the paintwork hitting a tree with the back end, but hopefully you won't crash. Notar is quieter, smoother and cheaper to operate than its equivalent with a tail rotor. This particular model is fully aerobatic, enough to make you turn green, if only with envy. I'll be giving it a full test flight in Sunday's programme.
Here's a wonderful and well-recognised shape, the DC-3 Dakota, and it comes from the same firm that built Notar, McDonnell Douglas. But what's an aircraft like this doing here at Farnborough amongst the fast jets? Well, this is a Dakota with a difference. It may look familiar, it was actually built in 1943, but it now has modern Pratt & Whitney turboprops and the very latest in avionics, including a satellite navigation system. Just like a spacecraft, really. These wonderful aircraft still turn up everywhere. That's the enduring quality of good aircraft design. Bob Coburn, a long-standing member of the BBC's aviation team, now based in Australia, gives us the first of his 3 reports on how they fly down under.
Now, this is how the really smart set go to work in Sydney. Forget the BMW and the Mercedes. When you live in the exotic ocean suburb of Palm Beach, you take something else. An old aviation export from days gone by.
I was totally impressed with the Beaver, the de Havilland Beaver. If you load it and it floats, it'll fly.
Vic Walton is one of the great characters of Australian aviation. From this converted boat shed north of Sydney, he and his wife Judy run Aquatic Airways, a fleet of vintage seaplanes run on a small budget and a bit of romance.
Whoever designed the Beaver was a genius, because it is a genius in design. It's absolutely brilliant. It's now, what, 30, 40 years into its life. Purely and simply, it's an aeroplane that you can operate in all sorts of terrible conditions. It's very, very rugged. Magnificently built and designed, and you can make money from it. Looking around overseas, mainly in the United States and Canada, we found that there's a lot of seaplane operations going over there. The basic principle struck me as being very good, in as much as you don't have to put concrete runways down. It doesn't cost you $1 million to set it all up, and it does give you a rapid transport system. Carry doctors, solicitors, we carry people, tourists. The advantage, of course, is if you want to hire a taxi cab in Sydney at the present moment, it costs you just as much as buying a seat on our aeroplane.
Well, how much is it to get down to Rosebery?
Well, it's only $50. So if you want a cab to do the same thing, it's $65. So we're cheaper in actual fact.
With a BBC budget, it had to be the plane. Yeah, they're quick, because the tide is going out fast. Vic has flown commercially all his working life.
I started to learn to fly in England, actually, and got myself a commercial pilot's license. Went and flew with Canadian Pacific on the South American runs and on the DO line in northern Canada.
Sydney, and we're on time. The harbour, the bridge, the Opera House. Touchdown is in Rose Bay.
Yes, I flew at Farnborough. Wonderful experience, hilarious actually. In fact, I got an award at Farnborough as the most inaccurate timekeeper for a pilot.
Now from Farnborough 92, let's move forward for a glimpse of the future. The Eurocopter Tiger helicopter represents the very latest in rotary technology, and it's the European contender for the British Army's new attack helicopter. The only flying prototype is at Eurocopter's headquarters at Marignan in the south of France, where Julian Tutt went for an exclusive look.
Tiger flies with ex-British Army test pilot Andy Warner at the controls and an inquisitive reporter in hot pursuit. You did have some problem with vibrations early on?
Nothing really to talk of. Right at the very, very beginning, we had small tuning to do. We have an anti-vibration system on board, and that needed a considerable amount of tuning. Now we've got it tuned, and I'm sitting here. It's a vibration level which I think you could offer in a VIP helicopter for civilian use, and it's very pleasant.
And what's the manoeuvrability like, Andy, with this snap of the earth flying? Good?
Well, it's lovely. I'm able to choose precisely which path I want between these various trees here, and just go straight through where I want. The roll capability, I'm not rolling rapidly from left and right now. I don't need it in this sort of terrain at this sort of speed, but it's there. I can just descend and I can climb. The power's there and the manoeuvrability's there.
Andy, this is obviously where a combat helicopter really earns its core. And how does this compare with, say, the Lynx?
Well, I think that we're actually one generation ahead on this. We've got handling characteristics which are, from the principle, slightly better than the Lynx. And of course, the big key is that really we've got a full weapons load and we're still able to maneuver around the trees. We've got the maneuverability and we've got the power when we need it to get us out of sticky spots. So if I want to go over this bit instead of underneath it, there it is. Well, one of the big advantages is having the tandem cockpit, so I'm sitting up the front here and I'm actually able to see everything that's going on. And Adam in the back has got a very good view as well, so he's joining me, he's using his eyes as well as mine, so we're able to spot the sort of obstacles which not even the most sophisticated of sensors are going to spot.
It must be every test pilot's dream to be the first to fly the prototype, but it really is a heck of a responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm being a little bit more careful here than I may be with a series of production aircraft, and I'm not taking the sort of risks that I would be likely to take with that sort of aircraft, where there are more of them. Obviously, there's still one highly important factor, that's me.
Tiger's test program is in good hands, and it's looking impressive. But these are early days with the crucial weapons systems and avionics still to be tested. The attack and anti-tank versions are due in service with the French and German armies in 1998.
So that's the end of our first visit to Farnborough 1992, and a show which has been dominated by the Russians. Our next visit will be on Sunday, BBC One at 5:25. Then we'll be putting England's rugby international Rory Underwood behind the controls of Britain's frontline fighter for the year 2000, Aoife. And we'll be seeing if Helen can master the fly-by-wire controls of the A320. All this while bringing you the latest flying action from the show. But until then, from all of us at Farnborough, good night. Hello and welcome to Farnborough 92 for the second of our 3 visits here. In this programme, we're going to be in the world's most exciting cockpits, from a helicopter without a tail rotor to the prototype of Britain's fighter for the year 2000. All that and the most riveting flying action from the show. With me, we have 3 flyers. Helen Sharman, Britain's first and only astronaut.
I feel weightless. I'm floating. I'm not sitting in my seat now.
Julian Tutt, former Army Air Corps pilot and Ski Sundays commentator. And Rory Underwood, flight lieutenant and one of the world's fastest men on the wing, literally.
Rory Underwood's 33rd try for England.
This is the plane that's really got the experts excited here. It's the world debut of Russia's new vertical takeoff fighter, the Yak 141. It's their version of the Harrier, but this is supersonic. Officially, the Kremlin has stopped the money for this project because they've run out of cash, and that's why the makers are here. They want foreign investors to help them pay for it. Unlike the Royal Navy's Sea Harrier, the plane has 3 engines and not 1. The big one, a turbofan with the main exhaust nozzle which swivels for takeoff and landing, and 2 smaller lift jets for stability. The Russians say it gives them versatility in combat as well as the stability for landing on aircraft carriers. This maneuver is something the Russians are very proud of. It's called a tail slide. A modern jet fighter shouldn't be able to do it because the computers won't let it, in theory. But the Su-27, we call it the flanker, can. The reason a tail slide is so rare is because there's a real danger that the engines might stall. That big flap behind the cockpit is an air brake. It slows it down for landing. The Russians can make these aircraft well enough, but they haven't been able to sell them in the West yet. Here's something a bit special. It's the first time this aircraft has ever been seen and heard taking off in the West. It's called Backfire by NATO, but the Kremlin calls it the Tupolev Tu-22, and it's a nuclear bomber. It was one of the best-kept secrets of the Cold War. It has swing wings swept forward for takeoff and landing and back for supersonic flight. Backfire can carry 10 nuclear-tipped missiles, and its role is to attack aircraft carriers and other large warships. Here you can see the wings moving back. This may be the shape of things to come, a Russian plane with British engines. It's the first time there's been one. It's a Tupolev Tu-04 with Rolls-Royce RB211 jets. The Russians have never been able to sell their planes to the West in the past because they haven't met our particular standards. But it seems this one will, and it's going to cost much less than a similar American or European aircraft. So real competition from the Russians for the first time. So it's the Russians who are really dominating this air show. It was the Soviets who gave Helen Sharman the opportunity to become Britain's first and only astronaut when she joined them on a Soyuz mission to the Mir space station last year. Helen has been with us throughout the week of Farnborough.
I spent 1.5 years in the former Soviet Union as part of my work with the space programme. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for me now here at Farnborough to be able to talk again with the same kind of people who I was working with.
People like the man flying this Sukhoi 29. He's Jurgis Kairis, the world aerobatic champion and a Lithuanian test pilot with the Sukhoi Design Bureau. I asked him how long he'd been flying his Su-29T.
Maybe 15, 18 hours.
You've flown this for only 15 hours and you're going to fly it this afternoon at Farnborough?
Yes, I have many practice to play in Sukhoi 26 and many hours in aerobatics.
What do you like particularly about this new 29?
Oh, 29 is my love. Very like it to play.
It's a very good technically designed aircraft, isn't it?
Yes, and have good possibilities in flight.
This is the show of the show. Even the pilots reckon it's one of the best displays they've seen. This is reputed to be the best aerobatic aircraft in existence. It's a brand new modification of the Su-26, the aircraft in which Jurgis won his world title. But this Su-29T has improved aerodynamics, it's lighter, and it has a magnificent thrust-to-weight ratio. It can pull plus 12 and minus 10 G, so the practical limits are those of the pilot, not the aircraft. Jurgis is in there without a G-suit.
Farnborough prides itself on covering all aspects of the aerospace industry, and there's an intriguing selection of helicopters here this year. There are new ones, big ones, and some extremely sophisticated ones.
Encompassing all three is the Anglo-Italian EH-101, a joint Westland-Augusta production. It's a rare European success story. A three-engined helicopter, it has a primary role of hunting submarines, but this is the utility transport version which EH Industries hope to sell to North Sea oil companies. The naval variant, the Merlin, has recently been ordered by the Canadians and the Royal Navy. From the sophisticated EH-101 to the nimble MIL Mi-34. This is Russia's newest training and aerobatics helicopter, which looks to be very good indeed. It can loop and roll and is capable of a few other maneuvers besides, which most helicopter pilots hadn't even thought about till now. One thing it can't do, though, is stand on its tail. Unlike the no-tail rotor NOTAR.
2 years ago at the Farnborough show, we flew the prototype of Notar. It's now in full civil production. In fact, 25 have already been delivered in the United States, with another 165 on order. This is the first in this country through the UK distributors Air Hansen. Now, Notar has considerable advantages for both the commercial and the private pilot, and we're going to try and demonstrate some of those now with the help of the McDonnell Douglas test pilot, Rich Lee. Rich, briefly, what are the advantages?
Primary advantages to Notar are improved safety. It's a much more quiet anti-torque system. It's more reliable, and for the pilot, it's a lot easier to fly.
Now, another of the advantages of no-tail rotor is the ability to do very accurate and fairly quick spot turns without over-torquing and keeping the aircraft hopefully nicely in control and with minimal adjustment on the pedals.
Hopefully you'll be able to see with the pedals that there's very little workload. Even as we're moving down the runway here at a fairly rapid pace and with a fairly rapid rate of turn. This demonstrates how well Notar performs with the wind at virtually any angle. I'll increase the rate of speed just a little bit to show just how fast you can go. Still, I'm not working very hard at all. Stop it. Hopefully that's a good demonstration of the effectiveness of the Notar system in a tail rotor type of maneuver.
It was pretty uncomfortable, that's for sure. Well, one of the big advantages of not having a tail rotor is getting into confined areas. And we're just going to run into one now. We've had a look at this already, so we know there aren't any wires or any nasties in there. This is the sort of exercise that military helicopter pilots will do a lot of. So we're coming right in down between the trees now. Now that's quite a tight clearing. I mean, you would bring a conventional helicopter in here without too much problem, but you'd be very nervous about maneuvering it like this. The only concern is where the main rotor is, and really you can put the tail right into the trees. And that's not the sort of thing that you'd want to be doing with a whirling tail rotor on the back, Richard.
I really think that the safety aspect is very, very important. I can't place a dollar value on peace of mind not having a tail rotor. But I rate it as one of the best aircraft I've ever flown. It's so smooth and it's so easy to handle.
In fact, it's fully aerobatic, capable of looping the loop and rolls. The sky goes very green. Well, that was enough to topple the gyros, if nothing else.
For the last week, Farnborough has been a trade show where aircraft manufacturers come looking for customers and partners. But this weekend, it becomes an air show with barnstorming displays to delight the public. And few can barnstorm better than Alan Wade in his Pitts Special.
outside flicks, go. 1, 2, and a hover. Check.
From spectacular sports flying to spectacular military flying, with action from 3 products of Britain's aerospace industry.
Here's somebody who knows something about speed, both on and off the ground. Rory Underwood, England's rugby Grand Slam winger. Now, Rory, most people know you for your rugby international career. That's been very exciting recently.
We've had a great couple of seasons. We've won the Grand Slam back-to-back and runners-up in the World Cup final. So for English rugby, it's been tremendous last couple of seasons.
But aren't you also flight lieutenant in the RAF?
That's right, yes. I've been in the Air Force 9 years now. I'm a pilot and I've just been flying with 100 Squadron on the Hawk at RAF Whitton.
Any plans for the future? What else might you fly?
Well, I'm hoping to actually pass on through the fast jet crossover system, and what I'm hoping to fly is the Jaguar.
What flying has impressed you today?
Well, there's been several aircraft flying. There's been a large Russian presence here, and the Russian displays have been very good, especially the flanker. Its tail slide and its hammerhead, and some of its low-speed flying has been quite impressive. Really, for the first time I've ever seen the Russians flying at an air show. The Raphael was good as well, and also the ever-impressive Harrier, so the GR7.
I bet you'd like to see NIFA here, wouldn't you?
Very much so. We'd like to see NIFA flying. It's had its problems with Germany and such like, but it'd be nice to see them flying. But I've had a chance to have a sneak preview, and I went up to British Aerospace Warton up in on the Lancashire coast and flying the flight simulator up there, which was tremendous, really was.
This is actually the EFA development simulator. When the first designs for EFA were produced, we took that data, programmed it into the simulator, so that not only the layout of the cockpit, the switches and controls, but also the flight control characteristics are exactly the same as we anticipate on EFA. Bear in mind that EFA is a fly-by-wire aircraft. This simulator is basically to refine designs, and it's nothing to do with a training simulator, but it has to do the same thing. It has to actually convince the pilot that he's there in the aircraft. Otherwise, he'll interact with the simulator in the wrong way, and we'll get basically wrong conclusions.
What I'll try and do is slow down to about 400 knots or so and see, put it to about 6G turn and see what happens.
Flight control system's designed so that if you leave the stick alone, the aircraft just stays as it is. How's it for precision?
Feels great. I mean, I've flown power controlled aircraft, so I know the feeling, and it makes life so much easier flying, but it feels great. Flying around here through the valleys, very nice to fly. I think 620 knots, it feels fine.
An important aspect of EFA is the fly-by-wire flight control system. I mean, bear in mind, if the flight control computers actually stop, then the aircraft is unstable and will go out of control very, very quickly. What we've got to strive for is realism. Realism is to do with persuading the pilot that he's actually flying. It's to do with beads of sweat on the brow, that sort of thing. And unless we have that realism, then we're not convinced that we're getting the right conclusions from our pilot assessments.
300 feet, 640 knots. 200 feet, 8G. So I'm regretting it also. Reheat. Over the way.
I expect the test pilot
level off at
to
about,
come back into this department and say,
3.5.
It's
grand.
as though I was flying the simulator. That would be the proof of the pudding.
Yeah, I mean, so far what I've seen, you know, there's a lot of propaganda about EFA, but the maneuverability looks great. Just the sort of thing the boys are after. I just hope I'm on the first squadron when it comes out.
Among EFA's competitors is this lovely little lightweight fighter, which comes from a fine pedigree. Built by a consortium of Swedish industries, including Saab and Volvo, it's been designed to meet the exacting standards of the Swedish Air Force, who've already ordered more than 300. They insisted it should be able to operate from roads no more than 900 yards long. The Swedish Defence Minister said this week that the Gripen is the cheap alternative to EFA, but we'll have to wait and see just how true that is. But Sweden certainly hopes to promote it as the fighter of the 90s, cost-effective, cheap and highly capable. When France withdrew from the EFA programme in 1985, it went its own way for a new fighter. Rafale means squall in French, and it's poised to take the lightweight fighter market by storm. This is the single-seat prototype, but it's thought the French Air Force will opt for a two-seat version. Mirage 2000 fighters have been high in the news recently, with the French government's decision to join the Western Allies in patrolling the skies of southern Iraq. This is the export version, the Dash 5, which is yet to find any customers, but at air shows there are few more spectacular performers. This might not shake off a heat-seeking missile, but it's great for the manufacturers of sick bags.
Now, we've seen some of the aircraft, but of course the pilot's equipment is also very useful, especially for somebody like Rory. Now, you've actually used one of these helmets, haven't you?
That's right, this is the Mark IV helmet, and this is the helmet that I'm actually using. On top of the helmet, as you can see, sticking out the front, is the MVGs, the night vision goggles, and these enable the pilots to look at night and fly around as if it's daytime. This helmet here is the Alpha helmet, and this is the helmet that is replacing the Mark IV throughout the Air Force. It's a lightweight design, and it's been improved all round. Now here, we have the head-up display that will be currently used in the EFA. The head-up display, or HUD, has all the symbology, information, navigational systems, the instrument systems and the weapon systems, all portrayed on the glass screen right in front of the pilot's eyes. The problem we have here is in a wartime scenario, as he's flying along, he has to avoid the ground, he has to look out for missiles, other aircraft, so his head is actually constantly looking around. So the problem is he's not actually looking at all of his information. Now here, in the next generation of helmets, which hopefully will be used in EFA, all the information is actually portrayed on the inside of the visors. So all his information will be there all the time. So even if he looks over his right shoulder, his left shoulder, up, down, anywhere, the information is right in front of him. So this is going to greatly decrease the amount of workload the pilot will have in the future.
And what we've seen is equipment that's specifically related to aircraft. What we have here is something that's useful for many other things. What have we got, Rory?
We've got a little device here, which is a GPS, a global position system, which can tell you where you are on the Earth's surface within 50 feet. As you can see, it gives you a position here.
Right, 51 degrees, 16 minutes north. Sounds like Farnborough.
It is, and it uses all the satellites around the Earth, receives a signal, and it gives you a three-dimensional picture on the Earth as to where you are. As you can see, 200 feet above the mean sea level. Extremely useful for walking across the moors, driving the car, or flying a small aircraft.
Or even a spacecraft. Manufacturers produce these devices, which also hold information about all the world's airports. Traditionally, a pilot uses radio beacons to navigate, and this is one kind called DME, or distance measuring equipment. It tells the pilot how far he is from that beacon. The transmitter is big and very expensive. But now a lone British engineer has developed a much smaller version, which, at a fraction of the price, could snatch a world market.
Yes, we've had approaches from 2 or 3 large countries in the UK with a view to marketing it because of its size and its price, and we're looking forward to doing very good business with it internationally.
Well, so much for the pilots. But what about the passengers? I was particularly interested to see what we've got here. On the seat in front of me, I can have a choice of 12 different movies in 3 languages. I can make reservations at my hotel, and I can even order my duty free. I think we'll have 2 of those. And I will pay with my credit card. If I swipe down here, I can plug in my personal computer into the seat next to me, make contact with head office. And the handset here doubles as a telephone. I can phone anywhere from here in the world. Да, привет. Да, будем встречаться попозже сегодня. Отлично. До встречи. Пока.
Spasiba, Helen. So, from the seats of the future to the aircraft of the future, and they're flying here at Farnborough. This is the remarkable Airbus A340. Remarkable because it has the longest range of any airliner in the world. 17 hours, or London to Sydney non-stop. We sat in with Airbus test pilots Nick Warner and Pierre Beau as they went through their Farnborough routine. But it's the computer that really does the flying, and it's there to stop the pilots making mistakes.
And we're aiming now to position the aeroplane in configuration 3 at low speed along the display line.
And now full stick back and maintain a vertical speed which is about 0 or around, or slightly positive. I have the full stick back.
Okay. There you go, flying bar at the moment.
This is an extraordinary manoeuvre for such a big jet. A slow pass in what's called a max alpha configuration. That means the nose is up as far as it can safely go.
Yeah, are we okay?
Okay, go, yeah. Full, off. Kill the alpha floor. You want to get a bit of height on this one for the descent.
This demonstration shows how, with a computerized flight deck, an aircraft weighing 150 tons can be safely flung around the sky with just a few delicate touches from the pilot. The plane is still under test, so the passenger cabin is rigged with monitoring equipment and tanks full of water for ballast instead of passengers full of duty-free gin.
Okay. What the top?
The A340 is the spearhead of Europe's assault on the long-range wide-body market. Until now, the Americans have had it all their own way, but that's changing, and this aeroplane is giving them a lot of sleepless nights in Seattle.
$50, $40, $30, $20, retard, $10, $5.
I was particularly interested to come to this stand to see what the British National Space Centre has to say. Because an air show like this isn't just about aircraft, it's about space as well. And this year it's particularly relevant, because 1992 is International Space Year and British Industry in Space Year. Over here is a British first. This is Markle's graphic simulation of a satellite control system. It allows ground staff for the first time to actually visualise how a satellite reacts to inputs from Earth and to the effects of space. Let's see what it's like in action. Now let's try a meteorite strike on the spacecraft. The spacecraft's now tumbling quite significantly. It's moved out of the alignment of the sun, and the solar panels are not soaking up energy properly. The batteries are discharging. But now the thrusters are firing, the onboard computers are working to bring that back into alignment and to control that tumbling. Britain's space interest is especially concerned with Earth observation programmes. Take this satellite instrument, for instance, or at least a 1/3 scale model of the real thing. Being developed by the CIRA group, it monitors the Earth's surface by scanning the globe every 2 days. Sea pollution, for instance, can be determined by looking at the colours produced by algae which feed off the pollutant. And this pinpoints the position and size of the problem. When ministers from the European Space Agency countries meet in November to discuss the directions for Europe's space effort, it'll be interesting to see how Britain's role will develop.
Looking at the world's problems of space is just one of the troubleshooting activities highlighted at the Farnborough Airshow. But Farnborough itself is also the home of a large number of research bodies whose influence extends worldwide. Robert Coburn now reports.
Well, you can't get much further from Farnborough than this. This is Broken Hill in outback New South Wales, and it's out here that the Royal Flying Doctor Service covers a practice as big as Britain. And yet the link to the Institute of Aviation Medicine back in Farnborough isn't as far away as you think.
Broken Hill's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. John Affleck, on the left, is on his way to bring in one of his elderly patients, Mrs. Gaynor Dixon, for hospital treatment. But like other doctors in this most Australian of services, he's had his specialist training at Farnborough.
Each day, doctors on our staff fly out to various clinic locations. In addition to that regular routine of clinic services, we will deal with emergencies at any time, 24 hours a day. We say that nobody that we service is more than 2 hours from a base hospital and all its facilities.
We're at Menindee Station, and local nurse Leah Burford meets the team and drives them out to the Dixons' place. When not on duty, Don pilots the aircraft in the Flying Doctors TV series. In reality, though, the service is hard-pressed for cash and in great need of new aircraft. One type now under consideration is the British Aerospace Jetstream, already a familiar sight on outback routes.
Well, here we are. Now, we've got to open the big door of the aeroplane, and that'll help us to load you in. And we'll get our stretcher out of the aeroplane and we'll actually transfer you onto that.
What do you think of the service, Mr. Dixon?
It's terrific. It's terrific. It's the greatest thing that ever happened in this country. My wife, she's had this complaint for 25 years. And progressively, she's got worse. And, well, now it's reached the stage that once upon a time I could handle it, but it's getting to the stage that without the assistance you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it.
1, 2, 3.
Whoops. The RAF would tend to take the view they're not going to actually move them into the flight environment and bring them home until they actually regard them as being fit to fly. Whereas in my case, I actually have to go out and get them in the first place. And of course, therefore, I have to apply all the knowledge that I've gained to make sure that I fly them with as much safety as possible.
In the bush, always expect the unexpected. It is impossible to underestimate what this service means to outback Australians.
Here's an oxygen mask. We'll just put that on your face, and we'll probably leave that there throughout the flight.
So what help is Farnborough's aviation medicine course out here?
It is the question of determining who is fit to become a pilot or a navigator. The content of the course is very much directed towards this occupational basis. For me, it has a different application. I can take all these principles and apply them to the patient that we have to carry. Because after all, whether you're flying the aeroplane or whether you're a passenger in it, and whether you're well or whether you're sick, in fact, the principles are all the same.
For John Affleck, the work goes on. Another night on standby for an emergency call, somewhere from the outback.
Heritage rather than nostalgia is a hallmark of this next display. Today's first vintage display is from the Royal Navy's historic flight, the Fairey Swordfish torpedo bomber, veteran of so many wartime actions. Now the forerunner to today's Sea Harrier, the Firefly naval fighter from the Korean War. Like the Sea Harrier, the Firefly was designed for operations from aircraft carriers. It packed a real punch with 4 20mm cannon and up to 2,000 pounds of bombs. 50 years ago, When the call went out from the Air Ministry in London for a light bomber to go to Berlin and back, de Havilland responded with the Mosquito, Britain's wartime wooden wonder. It was built largely of wood, hence the nickname, and small furniture workshops were used to construct it. This particular Mosquito was built in 1945 and served with the RAF until 1963, when it was bought by Hawker Siddeley, a predecessor of British Aerospace. Today it's kept in flying condition at the company's Woodford factory in Greater Manchester. Every year, the RAF Battle of Britain Memorial Flight gives 150 flying displays. Farnborough wouldn't be complete without one. Not quite Battle of Britain vintage, the Avro Lancaster was the standard Royal Air Force heavy bomber. A true hero of the Battle of Britain is the Hawker Hurricane, which carries the markings of Polish volunteers who served with the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. The Vickers Supermarine Spitfire, here being escorted by the Tornado, is probably the best-known piston-engined fighter in the world. The grace and beauty of a bygone era, the sound of a real aeroplane.
The Spitfire, the older they get, the more the crowds here at Farnborough love them. And there's something else without which, as they say, the show just wouldn't be complete. They've been at every Farnborough for more than a quarter of a century, but they always have something different to display, and they never fail to excite. The Red Arrows.
Knock off! Go!
so, as the Red Arrows make their final pass. That's it from Farnborough for today. See you on Thursday from me, John Humphreys. Goodbye.